Today we're joined by a founder who's empowering students from low opportunity areas. He's been named on the Forbes featured in the Sunday Times, and what really stands out is the mission: talent is everywhere. So Joe.
Because I was born in a small town, I saw how difficult it was to break the mold. Didn't really know what was out there for people like me. It's also just about not knowing what reaching your full potential really looks like.
Grew up in a single household as well, Joe, right? What was that like for you?
21st century Britain used to be an outlier, but is now the norm. Many of them are driven to try and do things to reduce their sense of kind of perceived vulnerability. And I think that's one of the reasons that Oxbridge produces all these kind of hyper-polished people. Turned down my graduate jobs and sort of gone to live back home. And that was sort of social suicide. So I didn't formally practice manifestation. This is why I'm doing what I'm doing. This is the journey I'm on, even though it feels hard, even though I've got all these doubts. And it's much easier to do that if you're tackling a mission that goes back to a problem that you faced in your own life, because it's deeply personal.
So welcome to Blank Space, where we talk about stories of fascinating entrepreneurs. And today we're joined by a founder who's not just building a business, but completely reshaping access to opportunity across the UK by empowering ambitious students from low opportunity areas to get them into the universities and careers that they want and they also deserve as well. So as the founder and CEO of Zero Gravity, he's leading what's become one of the country's fastest growing social mobility platforms, supporting thousands of students into top universities and elite careers. His work has earned national recognition. He's been named on the Forbes 30 Under 30, featured in the Sunday Times Young Power list, and recognized as a Tech Entrepreneur of the Year. He's also been honored in the King's Birthday Honors for the contribution to improving access to education and opportunity. But beyond all of these awards, and what really stands out is the mission behind all of this, and that is a belief that talent is everywhere, even if opportunity isn't. So Joe,
great to be on the podcast. You're selling me better than I can sell myself.
Yeah, yeah. Well, welcome to the podcast, Joe. But I want to talk about your experience, your upbringing and everything, and give everyone an opportunity to know what your real story is and what your story is behind building a business. I know you've built a fantastic business and we're in your office right now. But what is your story behind everything? And take me back to when you were younger. What was it like when you were growing up?
Sure. So my story starts 28 years ago, really, which is I was born in a small town in West Yorkshire called Morley, which is sort of equidistant between Leeds and Wakefield. It's sort of a post-industrial market town, what people might have referred to as a sort of red wall seat. But for me, it was home, and I grew up in a single-parent household. My mum's a speech therapist in the NHS. I just saw firsthand how difficult it was for students like me living in small towns, not necessarily having opportunity given to them on the plate. I saw how difficult it was to break the mold and getting to elite opportunities. Like when I was growing up, there was no universities that were sort of coming to my school, knocking on the door. There was no sort of massive big employers in the local area. These were things that you saw on TV screens, not things that you saw immediately in front of you in your day-to-day reality. So I was someone who was ambitious, driven, but growing up in a small town, didn't really know what was out there for people like me. And I was one of the lucky ones. I managed to win a place at Oxford University, which was a life-transforming moment for someone like me. But I did so in a way that in many ways was very arbitrary or luck-based, which is the idea of even applying to Oxford was never on my radar until when I was 16 years old. My school on GCSE results day put me up to be one of those unlucky students who has to open their results live on radio, which I was like, why are you making a stressful day even more stressful? But fortunately, I got a good set of results, and the radio interviewer, who was on BBC Radio Leeds, is a guy called Richard. And they asked me, are you going to give Oxbridge a go? And how do you feel about that as a kid from a state school in Yorkshire? And I just sort of froze live on radio, because the idea of even doing something like that had never even crossed my mind. So that kind of embarrassing moment, even as a 16-year-old, I look back and sort of get sort of a bit flushed and red in the cheeks because I froze on radio. It did sort of plant that seed of an idea that I was then able to turn into reality. But without that completely arbitrary moment, the idea of even doing something like that just never would have come to me. And I think many people can probably share similar journeys to mine. And if you grow up in one of these towns, it's not just about the lack of support. It's also just about this sort of like tyranny of low expectations as well. Just like not knowing what's around you, not knowing like what you're capable of doing, like not knowing what reaching your full potential really looks like. That was something that almost happened to me, but just out of luck didn't. And that's why I'm so passionate about trying to solve some of these problems today.
Okay, and you were also saying as well that you grew up in a single household as well, Joe, right? So like, would you say, like, I mean, what was that like for you? Do you remember any of that? Do you have any, not in a bad way, but do you have any anger towards that? Do you appreciate that? Would you say that that's contributed towards your success today? But what was that like growing up? Like, what do you think about when you go back to how you grew up with your mum or your dad? Or
with my mum.
With your mum. What was that like for you?
Yeah, I think growing up in a single parent household, when you've only got one parent that you can rely on and supports you, definitely does massively shape your mindset and some of your key behaviours and characteristics. It's actually really interesting looking at some of the research who goes into some of these like top jobs like in politics and entrepreneurship. It's actually a real disproportionate amount of people from single parent backgrounds, which seems quite weird because on the face of it, most people associate being from a single parent background as something that holds you back or causes issues. But I think the kind of inverse of some of the trauma that you can get through growing up in a household that breaks down or might not be completely stable is that you get this almost like chip on your shoulder and sense of inner drive. Because if you felt vulnerability in your childhood, usually the kind of key part of your mindset post that is going to be, what can I do to kind of take control over my future and feel a sense of agency in my life? And that comes through really strongly in people who face vulnerability in childhood. So I look at being from a single parent background as sort of both a positive and negative. Negative in terms of can create real difficulties in childhood. Positive in terms of it can give you that sort of fire in your belly to do stuff as you get older. So I don't necessarily see it as a disadvantage, but it's definitely shaped who I am today.
Yeah. So you would say that that's had like a very positive impact on the way that you are now? Or
I'd say from a business building point of view, definitely positive, because that sort of chippiness, that drive to take control of your life. I think more holistically, there's definitely challenges it creates as well. I think if you haven't come from a household with a strong or positive father figure, that can lead to issues in terms of building relationships or maybe some of the characteristics that you'd want if you were a father. Or being a sort of just male figure operating in the world. So I don't think it's all sunshine and rainbows. I don't want to kind of present the trauma as something which is great for business and is going to lead you to have a great life. I think there's difficulties that come out of it as well. But I think if you are somebody who's driven, having something that you're running away from is usually, in my experience, even more powerful than having something that you're running towards. People like to tell stories of, I set this goal and I was running towards this thing. But usually the most powerful drivers for people is when they're running away from something. And if you're from a single parent background, the vulnerability of childhood often is a massive driver of something that you are running away from as you sort of get into adulthood and have the ability to finally take control of your life.
I'm going to clip that. I'm going to clip exactly what you just said. That's amazing. And what would you say that the thing is? Because you're saying that you're running away from something instead of going towards something. What was that thing that you're running away from?
I think for a lot of people, it's vulnerability. Like if you're a child and you live in a household where you don't feel like you've got two supportive parental figures and you're wholly dependent on one person and maybe the other person in your life is not a stable character, creates a huge sense of vulnerability because in most households where you've got two parents, both parents play a really important functional role, and for a lot of people in 21st century Britain, like family breakdown has become something that used to be an outlier but is now the norm. So there's millions of people like me. I'm not an outlier in that regard, but it does create that sense of vulnerability that the kind of things that happen to you in your life are caused by external forces and you're not necessarily in control of your destiny, which is why I think when people get a little bit older, from single parent backgrounds, many of them are driven to try and do things to reduce their sense of kind of perceived vulnerability, which is why you have a lot of those people who I think, go into entrepreneurship and other kind of jobs that are, I suppose, are high agency jobs that require people to really take control or sort of drive things forward. And that's my hypothesis of why you do have a disproportionate amount of single parent background people in some of those professions.
That's actually really interesting. That's really interesting. So like when you were growing up and then when you went to uni, you studied at Oxford, right? What was that like? Was that like a shock to you going into uni? Was it very, very different? Like how was your experience when you're studying at uni?
Well, I kind of knew what I was getting myself into because, like, when you apply to Oxford, you go down to the interview and, like, you go into this crazy city with, like, the 1,000-year-old buildings and the dreaming spires. So before I turned up on the first day of...
When you say interview at the uni?
Yeah, so to get into Oxford University, they have an application system where you apply
you
through
can tell
UCAS.
I did not go to Oxford.
So you apply through UCAS. I mean, you have to do like an admissions test, which is a lot, for me, was a bit like an IQ test where they answer all these multiple choice questions and then write an essay. And then if you get through that, you get invited for an interview at the university, whereas a 17-year-old, you have to get the train down to the university and you'll sort of usually have 3 or 4 sort of 30 to 45 minute interviews with like Ward League and the academics who will like drill you on the subject, which is an intimidating thing for anyone, but for a 17-year-old, especially someone who's not used to being in that environment, it's an incredibly intimidating experience. So I knew what I was getting myself in for because I'd had to go through that interview process, which was very alien, but it's still definitely had a bit of shock factor turning up on Freshers Week and suddenly being surrounded by types of people who I just never met before in my life. Like I thought I was normal growing up in Yorkshire because everyone was kind of like me, just about managing, no one was super rich. But getting to university and seeing people who'd been privately educated since like the age of 3 years old with nannies and the parents had already bought them houses in London. There was just a level of kind of wealth and affluence I just never come across before. So
did you expect that when you went?
I suppose I knew it was going to be like that, but it wasn't until I saw it immediately in front of me that I realised how weird it was. And then studying there for 3 years, things that seemed weird and unusual before start to be normalised. Like if you're studying in a university every single day, surrounded by 1,000-year-old buildings, world-leading academics, public figures coming to speak to you, and lots of other posh students, and over time, eventually, your mind adapts and you sort of get socialised into the culture, and that stuff becomes less weird over time. And I think that's one of the reasons that Oxbridge produces all these kind of hyper-polished, hyper-confident people, because they're essentially, no matter what background they're from, they're all socialised into this culture, and they're kind of subconsciously told every day that, no, you are elite, you're part of this special group, that you're all going to be world leaders. And people believe it subconsciously because it's constantly being reinforced in their life. So I mean,
they're drilling the shit into you at that point.
Exactly, and it's difficult, those universities as well. It's the workload is intense. Like every single week, I had to write 2 4,000-word essays, and I'd have to sit down at the end of the week with a world-leading professor who would have read my essay and would drill me on it for 60 minutes, asking lots of questions back and forth. Yeah, it's like a one-to-one discussion, and that's something that is at the beginning really difficult to adapt towards, because in my state school I'd never done anything like that. I'd barely written an essay before that point, but having that kind of crazy workload at university and having to become used to sort of, I suppose, being put on the spot and having to defend yourself and your opinion, again, I think does build skills which in later life become really useful in terms of being very intellectually adaptable, having a certain work ethic, and being able to publicly back yourself and defend your ideas even when you don't know what you're talking about.
So there's 2 situations. You do go to Oxford and you don't go to Oxford. Do you think that you would have still created the business that you've created today? 0.
It's very difficult to know. Like I was always entrepreneurial, like even prior to university, from the age of 12, 13, I was teaching myself how to code, I was building web apps on the internet. So that wasn't something that was created by university. I was already like that prior to university. But But would I have had the confidence to do what I did? Would I had the sort of, I suppose, reputation behind me? Like, people shouldn't underestimate how having a university like that just on your CV changes your profile of how you're perceived by people, which, especially when trying to grow a business from the ground up, the unfortunate thing is that perception does matter. If I didn't have that, I think it would have been a lot more difficult to try and get in some of the rooms that I was able to get in. So it's very difficult looking back to say, was that a necessary condition of success? What I can say is it definitely helped me, having gone to university. Yeah.
Okay. And when you were growing up as well, because you're saying that it helped you, but you also had a lot of that naturally from when you were younger. What was your relationship like with your mum when you were growing up? I'm trying to understand, like, what really gave you that, like, oomph and that drive to teach yourself things, especially coding.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a natural thing to just do as a kid. It's interesting, but it's, what gave that to you? Like?
Yeah, well, I was lucky insofar that even though I was from a single parent background, and then my mum was incredibly good parent, sort of taught me the values that got me where I was today. I was also somebody who was interested in education. Like, my mum and my grandma in particular, like, really tried to cultivate my curiosity. And it's just all the little small things, like, at Christmas or birthdays, being given books rather than just being given video games. Like, those are things at the time that you just feel almost like annoyances because you want to play the latest version of FIFA rather than read a book. Yeah. But those are all the small things that over time all build up. So in that regard, like, that was a really important thing. But, like, did I have the greatest relationship with my mum growing up? Like, no. Like most kids, like, I was a bit naughty. I was in a single parent household. My mum was having to look after 3 pesky children, and I kind of railed against authority, and I wanted to feel like I was in control, which I imagine there's millions of people who've had a similar relationship with their parents growing up. So, like, you don't necessarily have to have in childhood the closest emotional relationship with a parental figure for them to have a positive influence shaping your values. Like, it definitely wasn't all plain sailing, but without some of the things that my mum did, I wouldn't be where I am.
For me to just listen to what you're saying, that's a very in-depth and meaningful thing. Like, I'm not just listening to that. I'm not just hearing it, I'm genuinely listening to what you're saying, because the meaning behind that, for you to do the things that you did when you were growing up day by day by day. I mean, I think that all of your experiences in life allow you to be the person that you are today anyway. So going to when you started your business, like, how did that happen?
So I'd graduated from university. I was 21 years old, and I had a number of sort of graduate job offers to work for a big law firm in the city of London or work for a hedge fund. But I knew in my heart of hearts that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I didn't just want to sort of chase money or prestige or have a kind of easy life climbing the corporate ladder. I wanted to do something where I could feel like I could have an impact on the world. Not because I was necessarily more virtuous or altruistic than other people, but just because the thing that really sort of got me going as a person was kind of building products that people want to use. I knew that from sort of self-teaching myself these skills in childhood. That was the thing that I was passionate about. So I decided to turn down my graduate jobs and just get going from my bedroom trying to build a business, which sounds like a romantic fairy tale story now because it sort of paid off, but at the time was a massive risk. And it was a risk not just financially, not just from a career point of view, but socially as well. I'd graduated from one of the top universities in the country, and whilst all my friends were going to sort of live in London, going into these fancy jobs, I'd turned all that down and sort of gone to live back home in Yorkshire.
Oh, so you went back.
So I went back to Yorkshire, and that was sort of social suicide in a way, because everyone else was moving into this new part of their life, whilst I was almost going back to square one. And people thought I was crazy, like not just my friends, but also my family members as well. They couldn't understand why I turned down these really lucrative job opportunities. Becoming a lawyer at a Magic Circle law firm, you can be earning 150k by the time you're 23, 24 years old. And people couldn't understand how someone like me put in all this effort to get good results at school, go to university. Why would you turn that down? when it was there for you on the plate. But I just knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So I got going from my student bedroom. I had 200 quid left from my student loan.
Oh, wow.
And I literally, this is not an exaggeration, I literally made a decision one night that rather than splurge that 200 quid going a few big nights out in Leeds, I was going to put this to a side and use this as my kind of startup capital to just do some of the basic things I needed to do, like buy domain name, buy hosting, use various SaaS tools. And that was probably the best financial decision I've ever made in my life. But that money almost got spent on Jaeger bombs. If I did do that, I probably wouldn't be here today.
That's crazy. Imagine that, just taking drinks. That's insane. From £250, and then you've made your business essentially from that. When you were going through that period where you went back, Drew, what conversations did you have with your family where they were saying to you, they clearly didn't want you to go back, they wanted you to take the job offers, right, that you were getting. What conversations were you having with your family?
Well, I was essentially just trying to justify it insofar as I've got this big idea. I want to build a tech platform that gets people like me into these universities and careers. It's going to take time for me to bring that vision to life. But I feel like it's better for me to try and do that now at the age of 21 rather than wait 10 years to start it, because even though I'm broke, I've got no money, I've got no network, I've got no experience at that point, what I didn't have was obligations. No family, no girlfriend, no mortgage. If it all went wrong, I could probably find a way to just go and get a normal job. Whilst if you try and start something at the age of 30 or 40, it's far more difficult because you've got other things that you have to think about, like your mortgage or your family situation or whatever it is. So even though I had no experience and no money, having no obligations meant I was able to have a higher risk tolerance at the age of 21. And that was my justification for doing it straight out of university, rather than doing what most of the people told me, which was get a proper job first and then worry about this in 10 years.
Did you ever doubt yourself when you're going through that period where you were building your own business?
Not just going through that period, I've doubted myself across this entire journey. I think there's really one of the really difficult things you've got to do as a founder is you've got to exhibit contradictory mindsets at the same time. So you have to be someone who is really delusional, ambitious, I'm going to take over the world, I'm going to achieve these things that no one thinks I can achieve. You have to have that kind of naivety, that delusion, but you also have to be the rational person who's able to take really logical decisions and be really reflective about where you are. So that doubt has always been with me. I've always been doubting, am I doing the right things? Am I on the right path? Is this strategy correct? Is this actually going to work? But at the same time, I had to counteract that doubt with almost like the manifestation of that I can make this work. I can see the big picture. I'm on that journey. So, but the doubt never leaves you, but it's particularly strong at the beginning because you don't have anything that you can look back on and say, oh, I've already done all this, so why can't I do that? At the beginning, you've literally got nothing. You've got no validation. You've got no social proof, no signaling. So it's inevitable that the doubt is going to be particularly strong at that stage. But I was just so locked in on my vision that I was literally like, fuck it, I don't care. If I fail, I don't care if I fall on my face. I'm just going to go after this as hard as I can. And I hope it works. I think it can work. I can see it in my mind. And even though I've got all these doubts, I'm just going to ignore those and keep pushing.
Absolutely amazing, man. And when you were going through, when you had that type of mindset and you were talking about manifestation, do you actively do manifestation? Do you think of it actively or?
No, so I don't sort of sit down in the morning or the evening and get out of the mat and do my Zen thing. I'm too uncool. I'm too northern to do stuff like that. I don't know if I could get away with doing that. I'd be ripped by my friends the rest of my life. So I didn't formally practice manifestation, but informally, all the time, I was naturally letting my mind loose, thinking about this is where I can go to, this is what I can do. I can see how this could work. So I don't think to manifest the future, you necessarily have to have an active practice. Maybe that can be helpful if you need some way to make it habitual. But you do need a way to informally keep reminding yourself just day to day, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. This is the journey I'm on. Even though it feels hard, even though I've got all these doubts, this is the small step I'm making to that big vision. And you've got to constantly be reminding yourself of that. And it's much easier to do that if you're building a business or tackling a mission that goes back to a problem that you faced in your own life, because it's deeply personal. Like if I was building an accountancy platform, it would have been very difficult for me to manifest in my mind, oh, this is the incredible accountancy platform I'm going to build, because that's not personal to my life. That's not something that has shaped my existence. But if the business I'm building is a platform to get people like the younger version of myself into these universities and careers, I can immediately emotionally connect and resonate with that, because that's my life, that's my story. So you've got a real competitive advantage building a business that taps into your own story, not just for branding, but for making that manifestation part much, much easier.
I know I was saying to you that I sit in a room sometimes and it's like dark and it's black and I just like manifest. So I don't actively like sit there like fucking trying to like make shit happen. But I do sit and I just think in like a dark room and just sit there. But yeah, sorry Joe, you were saying that you get in the shower. Now everyone's going to be imagining you in the shower.
Don't imagine that.
But you think of stuff like when you're in the shower, you said.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be like formal manifestation. You don't need to sit down on some kind of mat and manifest. It can be simple as like, I make so many big decisions in my head in the morning when I have a shower.
Oh yeah?
Because I feel like it's such a sobering experience to be just stood there in the water. There's nothing else in your environment that's kind of visually stimulating you, or it's just you in the moment. And even though it's cliche, it does sort of clear your head to make decisions. And then occasionally if I have to do something, I make a big decision over the weekend. This is very goofy. I just love still locking in for like an hour and just playing like FIFA.
Oh yes.
Like on the TV. And I found actually putting in a podcast and playing some FIFA, it puts, I don't know what it is, it puts me in a state of just like unconscious relaxation. I think because I'm playing a game that I've played for like 15 odd years and you just know how to do it without thinking. And it makes it much easier to then clear your head and make a decision because like you're not concentrating on anything else other than just subconsciously playing the game. So that sounds really goofy, but the point I'm trying to make is that you don't need to have some kind of formal weird practice. It can be something very personal to you in terms of those moments where either you get clarity on the decisions you need to make to take you where you want to be, or those moments where you let your mind sort of run wild to sort of take you to that future that you could have.
Would you say that your way of, I guess, like relaxing yourself is to actually play games or play FIFA, and then that's where you get your clarity from?
Yeah, in a weird way. It's like at the weekend, like I would usually do that for like an hour and a half.
Oh, wow.
So probably playing online with a bunch of 13, 14-year-olds. They've probably got no idea they're playing against a 28-year-old. No. But honestly, I found, maybe I'm just trying to justify playing FIFA at the weekend. But I found genuinely, I make so many decisions doing that because it creates mental clarity for me. So whatever your thing is, whether it's going to the gym or sitting in a dark room or playing FIFA or going to the shower, like just do what works for you.
Okay. And what is the most difficult thing that you have ever been through? That's the most like profound memory that you can remember.
In my entire life, or in my business journey?
Entire life.
I think, again, going back to childhood, I think growing up in a single parent family, there were various moments of that in terms of parental breakdown and various things that happen that stick with you for a long, long time. Like anything that puts you in a position where you feel very vulnerable, especially when you've got the one parent who you can't rely on and maybe in some ways a negative influence more than a positive ones. Those are the things that subconsciously shape people for a long time. There's a reason that so many psychologists, when they're trying to understand people's mindset and behaviours, will start by going back into things that happened in childhood. And I think there's a danger in too much introspection. I think, especially when you get older, it's important to understand the drivers of your behaviour, but you don't want to kind of indulge yourself too much and fetishize them. Like you want to be someone who is a person of action, not just a person of introspection. So I don't spend loads and loads of time nowadays like thinking through those moments and experiences and mulling over them. But what I do understand is I've tried to reframe them as things that have shaped my mindset today. And that when I do stuff now as a 28-year-old, I think that, okay, I understand that my behaviours stem from this, but I'm not going to let these things hold me back. I'm going to turn it into the thing that moves me forward. And I think that is the thing that you can do with a lot of negative traumatic events. I know it sounds difficult. I know it sounds perverse, but the beauty of going through trauma is the ability to turn it into your competitive advantage long term. And it's easier for some people than others, and a trauma can be debilitating in the short term for a lot of people, but it can also be a massive driver of action. And I found that certainly in my own life.
That's beautiful. I couldn't agree more with that. Just from I know you're talking about your experiences, but my personal experiences. And I also wanted to ask you something else as well. I'll ask you the last question. What is the most important thing that is pushing you forward with your business now mentally? What is the big factor that allows you to keep going through your business from this day?
As we spoke about a bit at the beginning, people are running away from things as much as they're running towards things. So I could give you the sort of sexy answer about wanting to make the vision a reality and change the lives of millions of people, and that is definitely part of it. But a lot of it is fear of failure as well. I might not be the 21-year-old in the bedroom anymore building something on my laptop, but I've now sort of gone this 7-year journey, done all of this stuff, and I want to make sure that it continues to succeed. And the idea of waking up one week and zero gravity being in the dust as a business, which is possible, most startups do fail, that is something that always hangs in the back of your mind, that you want to make sure that you're running as far away from failure as possible. So I think that probably subconsciously is just as big, if not a bigger driver than the sort of mission-driven, how do I make this vision a reality? But I think it's a good thing in many ways. As long as you're not paralyzed by the fear, if you can use that as a productive energy to constantly bring that intensity day to day, if I need to make sure I do X, Y, and Z because it's going to take me one step further to where I need to be and one further step away from where I don't want to end up, that can be a positive force, not a negative thing.
Very interesting. Joe, thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Great to be on the podcast.
Thank you so much.